What's going on, guys? This is Tower number 9, and we are back on some Sabine gameplay today. We got the Sabine ran Cunning matchup against Boba Fett Command, and this is a matchup that is potentially pretty important in terms of just basing on the so-called metagame or whatever that we saw in that first tournament. There were a lot of people running Boba Command was, I think, the most common deck, and Sabine Cunning was the second most common deck, so this matchup seems relatively important, and I've heard some different things about this. I personally think that Boba Aggression is better against Sabine than Boba Command is, but I know that some other players disagree with that. I've heard it claimed, or I've seen it claimed on Discord, for instance, that Boba Command should be incredibly favored against Sabine Cunning. That isn't entirely my sense of the matchup, but figured I would bring some more gameplay of this matchup into the channel here. So this time we have myself playing Sabine Cunning versus ZuhairGalaxy on Boba Command. I have the initiative for this first round, and let's see how this goes. So I'm going to lead off with Leia Organa Defiant Princess, using her ability to ready a resource. Hmm. My opponent here plays at Greedo. I'm going to play a Greedo of my own. Now, this is an interesting situation because uh, my I think my opponent took the initiative there. I'm not sure, and then I use Sabine's ability, one damage to each base. Um, so this is an interesting situation because right now, my initial position is stronger than that of my opponent, but if my opponent gets the Greedo top deck, we could actually see it being very favorable for him because in a situation where Greedo Greedo could attack, trade with one of my units, and in the event that he hit the top deck, kill the other one as well and get a 2-for-1, which would be high value. We'll see if my opponent goes for that. The problem, of course, with that tactic is that if it misses, then, you traded 1-for-1 instead of 2-for-1 and gave some tempo and so on, but not sure there's a overwhelmingly better play to make at this point. And this turn, I'll be able to potentially use Snapshot Reflexes and then also bring out the Green Squadron A-Wing. Alternatively, I could play the Millennium Falcon here. So I definitely have some options of my own for exerting pressure. So yeah, he opts to go for the attempted 2-for-1 with his Greedo defeating my Greedo. He uses his discard but misses, and so my Leia Organa will remain in play. So I actually use the Snapshot Reflexes here. So Snapshot Reflexes is a relatively new card. Here it is, 1 cost, +1/+1. When played, he may attack with attached unit. So in this case, it allows Leia to swing in for 3. And my opponent's next move is to play a Super Laser Technician, so I'm really happy about these. I am really happy about these Snapshot Reflexes because if I had not used Snapshot Reflexes there, Leia would have had 2 HP, and my opponent could have used the Energy Conversion Lab to ambush Leia with the Super Laser Technician, which would then not only defeat Leia, but get him that extra resource already in position. But because I had the extra HP, Leia's out of range of that play. So then I'm going to go on to use Sabine's ability and deploy a Green Squadron A-Wing. So right now my board is a lot stronger than that of my opponent. And my leader deploys this turn. The only problem is that his leader will also deploy this turn, presuming that he manages to get his Death Star Stormtrooper, or I said Death Star Stormtrooper, his Super Laser Technician killed, which seems extremely likely. So in the event that my opponent does that, it will be a scenario um, where we will see Boba Fett able to deploy this turn. So swings in, defeated by Leia, doesn't defeat her thanks to those snapshot reflexes, but does become a resource. Leia then swings in for another 3 damage. My opponent now uses the Energy Conversion Lab to ambush the A-Wing with a Defender and resolves the ambush before the shielded, which is a really strong play against those defenders or against those A-Wings, because you can then take 1 damage, defeat the A-Wing, and put the shield on, making you still shielded for future encounters. I use Sabine's ability. My opponent deploys Boba. I'm going to deploy Sabine. We'll see if my opponent has an immediate answer for Sabine. It is possible they don't have a shoot first or a surprise strike to allow Boba to take Sabine out immediately, but that's just one of those things you kind of have to deal with sometimes in this matchup. Yeah, so it does end up being a shoot first, so Boba is able to defeat Sabine very easily. And I felt like I had a strong advantage before this turn, but on this turn, there have definitely been some problems. I end up bringing out a wing leader and buffing Leia here. So Leia now a 5/5, but she has taken 2 damage, so she's actually 5/3. I am substantially ahead on damage dealt to the enemy base. But Zuhair has the initiative. Let's see what happens here. Boba could still defeat Leia, but would take a lot of damage in doing so. Unless there's another shoot first, of course. Ends up being a waylay on Leia. Now this is interesting. This is arguably a misplay, and I think actually my opponent decides not to do it. Because if you waylay Leia here, yes, I lose the attachments, but I can then replay Leia and exhaust Boba immediately. So using waylay on units that have strong wind plate effects is not really that good. So my opponent decides to instead use an asteroid sanctuary, exhausting Leia, and then giving a second shield to the 7th Fleet Defender. I have the Wing Leader swing in there, inflicting 2 damage on the enemy base. Wing Leader, I think, is not going to be too long for this world, with the Defender able to easily defeat it. 2 shields on there mean that it's not even becoming vulnerable as a result of picking off that ship. I'm going to use Sabine's ability. Boba attacks my base directly. I'm going to play out. Uh, I'm going to play out Spark of Rebellion. Look at my opponent's hand and discard a Fet's Fire Spray there, which is something I'm very happy to see out of the game. Now my opponent does waylay Leia, removing those attachments after Boba has already exhausted. Not the highest value play ever, but it's a situation where looking at the opponent's hand, there just wasn't really that much that was good. So I'm going to swing it, play the Falcon, and swing in with it. My opponent takes the initiative. Now, one thing to note is that I saw a snapshot reflexes in my opponent's hand. So my opponent could use that to have this defender defeat the Falcon in one shot. And there's an argument that I should actually withdraw the Falcon to hand in order to dodge that, but I decided to keep it in. It's kind of one of those things where if the opponent goes for that play, that's okay. It's at least preventing some damage to the base. And I do have that Leia Defiant Princess that I can replay this turn. I can follow up with a Lothal Insurgent, so I'll be developing my board at least some, and also exhausting my opponent's stuff. My opponent opts to attack with Boba at first. I play Leia Defiant Princess and exhaust the defender. My opponent then plays a No Good to Me Dead to exhaust the Falcon. Now, exhausting the Falcon with No Good to Me Dead is a lot worse than using it on most other units because I can opt to voluntarily withdraw it to my hand at the end of this turn, at which point I'd be able to play it and it would be ready. I play a Lothal Insurgent, which is going to cause a random discard since I played Leia Defiant Princess first. And we end up discarding Bosk, which is a high value card to get rid of for sure. Happy to see Bosk go. He is a nasty, nasty customer. I'm going to use Sabine's ability, 1 damage to each base. And then this turn, I believe I'm going to withdraw the Falcon so that I can use it this turn. It would have remained exhausted because No Good to Me Dead prevents a unit from readying during the regroup phase, so it would not have been able to ready up for this next turn. However, because of the Falcon's card text, I can actually just play it and it will be ready when played, which will allow it to attack this turn regardless. All right, so this turn I'm probably going to want to play the Falcon and the Rogue Operative from hand. And Additionally, I'm going to try to get as much damage on the enemy base as I can with my units. My opponent plays Agent Callus, defeats Leia Defiant Princess, and draws a card. I'm going to have the Lothal Insurgent swing in for 3 damage to the enemy base. That enemy base is getting low. If I draw a surprise strike, this Lothal Insurgent could kill the base in one shot, but my own base is also taking some major damage. 17 to 19 here, or 17 damage taken to 19 damage taken, so I'm on 8 life, and my opponent is on, yeah, I'm on 8 life, and my opponent's on 6. So I play out the Rogue Operative here. Um, Part of what I'm thinking is, so Rogue Operative hits for 4. By swinging for 4, that would be enough to defeat the enemy base if I draw a Fleet Lieutenant. In addition to a surprise strike, I can defeat the enemy base in one shot. And then the enemy hits my base here for 3. I play the Falcon. I actually think playing the Falcon here might have been a mistake. It's possible that I should have just taken the initiative. And it looks like maybe that's actually what I decide here. Yeah. I decide, you know what, I was gonna play the Falcon, but I actually have to take the initiative because if the opponent still has that snapshot reflexes, then Boba can kill my base in one shot. However, we see a waylay used on my rogue operative. So basically I'm just hoping to draw a surprise strike now to close out the game. And I have 2 shoot firsts, which are not gonna do it. So it looks like this one is going to go to my opponent. The main thing that I could potentially win with here being some scenario where I can get the Falcon out and swing again. The shoot first helps, but yeah, unfortunately didn't get what I was hoping for and not quite able to close the game. If I had hit a surprise strike with that draw, I would have been able to do that. And yeah, this game didn't get use out of Jeddah City, so it would have been better to have the 30 HP base, which I think is sometimes the case in aggro mirror. Not always, but sometimes. Mhm. So ultimately, a close game, but a victory for my opponent. I had to kind of take the initiative at the end there and hope to draw into something that would allow me to win the game, and I did not get it. Um, so we are 0 and 1. And let's see if I can do better in round 2. And I believe we are not sideboarding. We're just playing with our normal decks here. Okay. All right, what's going on here? So this time I will be going first again. And I have, once again, I can potentially play a Green Squadron A-Wing, or I can play Sabine Wren. I end up deciding for the A-Wing here. I'm not entirely sure why. I actually think Sabine Wren is maybe, well, it's hard to say. So going space can be quite effective against Boba in some cases, but I'm not sure that it would be universally the best. So this turn, my opponent just takes the initiative. So if they have a ship that can ambush and kill my A-Wing, they may well do that. If not, I can potentially play. I actually have quite a good hand here. So if they don't ambush and kill my A-Wing, I can use the Wing Leader to buff it. If they do ambush and kill the A-Wing, I can play the Fighters for Freedom. Those are both like honestly pretty reasonable plays. So the question becomes whether my opponent has a 7th Fleet Defender or a Consortium Star Viper would be the other thing that would allow that move. So it does end up being a 7th Fleet Defender, but my opponent, I think, actually doesn't opt to ambush here, just plays it normal. Um, which is, I would say that's probably an error. I would just take the kill here. So I end up playing the Wing Leader to buff it up. Now it's out of range of a one-shot kill from that 7th Fleet Defender. And now I'm going to be able to attack the enemy base. One thing that this does make me wonder is, does the opponent have a super laser technician that they're hoping to save the energy conversion lab for? So it is at least conceivable to me that this play means that Super Laser Technician Energy Conversion Lab combo is on the way, and my opponent is saving the Energy Conversion Lab epic action for use on a Super Laser Tech in order to ramp Boba out quicker. That's in general, in my opinion, a really high impact, really positive play for the opponent, and it does strike me as maybe the reason that they would play it out like this. So this turn, one thing I could do, so I'm going to have four resources. The question is, what do I want to resource? One thing that I could do is I could resource one of these three cost units and think to play the X-Wing, the Alliance X-Wing, and then also Leia Defiant Princess. If the opponent gets Boba out this turn, a more straightforward play might be to just go for the Fleet Lieutenant here. Save Leia Defiant Princess for the future. The X-Wing itself is like decent, but not super high value. That would also leave me one resource for potential shoot first. End up resourcing the X-Wing here. And could be wrong about that. Not entirely sure if it's the best option, but that is how I do it. The 7th Fleet Defender can attack and defeat my Wing Leader without taking damage, just losing the shield, or it can attack the A-Wing and do some damage, but not defeat it. My opponent opts to take out the Wing Leader. I'm going to use my Fleet Lieutenant to send a major hit therein for 5 damage. And then my opponent now does go with that Super Laser Technician play that I thought might be possible. Uh, doesn't get immense value, so just doing some damage to the Fleet Lieutenant that will be able to deploy Boba this turn. I deploy Sabine before my opponent deploys Boba, though, which is nice because it means Sabine is going to be able to get in there, deal some damage to the enemy base, and even if my opponent has a surprise strike or shoot first to allow Boba to take out Sabine, she at least did get that hit in. And because I was worried about being knocked out by a shoot first, like I was in the previous game, I decided to deploy Sabine before I used her ability. And so in this case, my opponent actually has a Snapshot Reflexes, uses that to defeat Sabine in one shot, and I'll take the initiative here. Boba Disintegrator also deploys this turn. But this game's looking pretty favorable because my opponent has already taken huge damage. So it really creates a situation where the the overall like amount of room my opponent has is really small. I have the initiative, so I'm going to be able to. There are potential draws. So if I had drawn a surprise strike, I would actually just win the game here. Didn't draw it, but I am going to just swing in with the A-Wing, so that's going to be 5 damage to the enemy base. And now with the enemy base on 3, my opponent has to attack and kill my Fleet Lieutenant, or else I just attack and win the game. Alternatively, we could see a Sentinel getting deployed, which is, that is an option. But Fleet Lieutenant here is poised to win the game by attacking the base if nothing's done about it. And I haven't actually played any cards yet. I could always use Leia Defiant Princess. So my opponent has Boba Disintegrator take out the Boba Disintegrator takes out the Fleet Lieutenant. I'm gonna bring out Leia Defiant Princess and exhaust Boba. Boba the leader, that is. Boba collecting the bounty. And we're gonna see how this continues. The defender there hitting the base for 3. My opponent hasn't actually played anything yet. Just been doing actions with the cards that are already there. And then I'm gonna deploy a Rogue Operative as well, which my opponent will have to clear. Rogue Operative can swing in and defeat the enemy base in one shot at this point. I do think there's a chance my opponent has an overwhelming barrage here, which would be potentially major, but even a barrage from Boba, that would be 7 damage. So he could spend 5 to kill the buffed A-Wing and 2 to kill Leia, or he could kill he wouldn't be able to defeat both the A-Wing and the Rogue Operative, even if he had it. And so my opponent actually just concedes there. It's a very unfavorable situation. Okay, so now we're 1-1. And we are going to go into game 3 here and see what we can do in the classic the classic Sabine Boba matchup, Cunning Sabine versus Command Boba. So this time my opponent will get to go first, I believe. And I do think in that last game, even though the Super Laser Technician ended up getting some value, allowing Boba to come out a turn sooner, and that did allow him to kill Sabine with Boba very quickly. And so that I do think that's like I think that's reasonable. I don't think that's like garbage, but I do think that he would have been better served by using the energy conversion lab to ambush the A-Wing with the Seventh Fleet Defender. I think that would have ultimately been a stronger play. Could be wrong. That's just kind of my sense of it. Okay, so with that, we're going to move on. Round three. Let's see how this goes. Sorry about the sorry about the coughing there, guys. I am still sick, unfortunately. Greedo hits the field. A-Wing on my side of the board, and then Sabine's ability being used, 1 damage to each base. All right. Zuhair does have the initiative here. Let's see how this goes. Ends up being once again, Seventh Fleet Defender, countering that A-Wing with the Energy Conversion Lab. I'm going to bring out the Fighters for Freedom here. So Greedo could attack into the Fighters for Freedom and try to luck out, but ends up hitting the base instead. I swing into my opponent's, or I use Sabine's ability to do damage to both bases, rather. And then we're going to end the turn. Not a great start for me, but we'll see how this goes. That Seventh Fleet Defender is a great answer to the A-Wing. And, yeah. All right, what do we got here? Zuhair with the initiative. Now, because the energy conversion lab was already used, there isn't a chance that we're going to see the Super Laser Technician energy conversion lab play. Although if my opponent is running resupply, which I think some but not all Command Boba decks are running, that would still allow a ramp piece to land this turn and potentially deploy Boba. And that's exactly what we see here. A resupply is used. So now on 5 resources, Boba will be able to deploy. I use a fleet lieutenant to have the Fighters for Freedom swing in for 5 damage. Greedo swings into the fleet lieutenant and defeats him, and then goes for the top deck and hits it. So that is going to be 2 extra damage on the Fighters for Freedom. Uh, Here I probably just want to deploy Sabine to get her out before Boba. Arguably, it would have been better for me not to use the fleet lieutenant this turn and to instead just try and save some resources to use Leia Defiant Princess to exhaust Boba once he deploys, but that's not how I ended up playing it. Boba deploys. Sabine swings into the base here for 3 damage. And we'll see if there's a trick here to allow Boba to defeat Sabine in one shot, like we saw in the previous games. And there is, this time, a surprise strike. So Boba, as you can see here, Sabine ran the actual leader card, doesn't necessarily get a ton of value when faced with Boba Fett, especially if he ramps out early, because there are many cards, shoot first. So shoot first, snapshot reflexes, surprise strike. There are several different ways for Boba to actually defeat Sabine in one hit, and we've seen it in these games. So Sabine has not been getting a ton of value on her unit side, at least, but has still been able to push some damage to the base. Okay, my opponent did swing with the defender there, which allows me to take the initiative, and so this turn I would be able to exhaust Boba with the with Leia, but ultimately I opt to attack there instead. And I think this is why, yeah. So my opponent plays a overwhelming barrage and clears these units. I was worried about a potential barrage, so I decided not to deploy an additional unit, um, since the stuff that I had in play was low HP. I then play Leia Defiant Princess after my opponent has used the barrage, exhausting Boba and preventing him from swinging for 6 with the extra damage from that barrage. My opponent hits my base for 3, I bring out the Falcon, opponent takes the initiative. Falcon hits the enemy base for 3, and I believe I'm going to use Sabine's ability here as well for 1 more damage to each base. So if I had played Leia Defiant Princess immediately, it actually could have gone very negatively for me. I'm happy that I ended up doing it this way. Here I have black 1, which is going to potentially allow me to draw a bunch of cards. Um, my opponent does have the initiative here. Yeah, and 17 damage on the enemy base. That is getting pretty close to kill range. My opponent brings out Fet's Fire Spray here. So it's kind of an odd circumstance. My opponent has exact lethal on the board. Or no, I'm sorry. My opponent has off by 1 lethal on the board, but opts to use Boba there to attack into Leia Defiant Princess. Um, so here I kind of want to deploy, I kind of want to deploy black 1. The problem is Fet's Fire Spray can just kill it. But it will give me these card draws, so I go for it anyway. Black 1, when played or when defeated, you may discard your hand if you do draw 3 cards. I happily discard a single open fire in exchange for 3 cards. And so my opponent could opt to push more damage to my base here, but is now actually in a pretty dangerous position because I would be able to potentially defeat the enemy base quite fast, uh, depending on how exactly it goes. So right now it's 17 damage. So the one thing that I can do here is I can use Sabine's ability. If I use Sabine's ability, my opponent goes to 21 damage on base, which then means that Black 1 can kill the enemy base in 1 shot. It does put me in a slightly more dangerous position because there is now a risk of a surprise strike on Fet's Fire Spray, which would do 8 damage and defeat me. But if my opponent doesn't hit the surprise strike and doesn't have a way to deal with this stuff, I will win the game. So I do use Sabine's ability, and to be fair, that would have been a kill either way. My opponent doesn't draw the surprise strike, I guess, has Fet's Fire Spray take out Black 1. I have the Falcon hit the enemy base for 3. My opponent concedes here because I can just use Sabine's ability to blow up the base. Um, and he doesn't have any sort of extra damage card that he can use to get the last damage in that he needs on my base. I could have also deployed another Falcon to overwrite the first Falcon and had that attack into the enemy base to try and close the game, but it would have been longer. So that was the third game there. Ultimately, a win for me. Ended up going 2-1 in this set, and I have to say that last game was very close. If my opponent had hit the surprise strike top deck, the Fet's Fire Spray would have been able to close the game. So ultimately 2-1 in a close set of games here. Sabine did end up with the edge this time, but I think it could have gone either way. I really don't think this matchup is insanely Boba favored. I think that it's a situation where either deck can win. Um, but at the same time, Sabine has a much easier time with slower decks, and Boba getting a 4/7 leader out on 5 resources is really good. Those stats are very, very strong for that time in the game. We've seen some other leaders that are 4/7 but only deploy on 6 resources. So that would include, so Luke Skywalker, Faithful Friend, has that. I believe the recently previewed Jyn Erso leader actually comes out at, so I think she deploys on 6 resources and is also 4/7. So 4/7 on 5 resources for Boba is a kind of above curve, a quote unquote above curve leader set of stats. So it's an interesting situation. Ultimately, though, Sabine is able to deal with it in at least some cases. So, and we even had the defenders coming out to counter my A-wings repeatedly in these games. In fact, I think we had defender into A-wing all 3 times. The one time my opponent opted to save the energy conversion lab for a later play. Uh, and despite that, I was still able to go 2-1. So I do think that it's not an insanely bad matchup for Sabine, but I think I think it's a situation where it can really go either way. Okay, that's going to do it for this one, guys. Thanks to you all for watching. We'll be back later with some more Star Wars Unlimited content, and I will post my Cunning Sabine deck list in the comments below, so you guys can check that out as well if you want. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you guys later.